Okay. Hello, I'm Jana Edwards, and I am going to do my post-observation with my cooperating teacher, Megan Middleton.
Hello.
And thank you, Megan, for doing this with me.
Yep.
It's been a great experience. And what I'm going to do now is ask you some questions which are going to lead us to talk about your strength areas, your growth areas, and then what will be our next steps.
Perfect.
All right. So my first question for us is to get going is to realize that this is all about a reflection conference for us to have. And we can learn from each other, and I'm looking forward to your different responses. So my first question is this. What were the key points in your lesson?
All right, so the key points in my lesson were students were making triangles, right triangles, and then looking at the ratios within two sides on the triangle, and then kind of looking at the patterns, finding similarities, differences within the different triangles that groups made.
Sure. And then what students' behaviors did you observe when you were doing the lab with your students?
With this class, the one that you saw, they were real good. All of them were really engaged. They were helping each other and just kind of working together and creating their triangles that they needed.
So the next question would be is what was exciting or surprising, or what part of the lesson was frustrating for you?
The most exciting part was seeing how they found the connections, and so I didn't really have to prompt them that much. They looked at the data that we collected and they really saw the connections that I was hoping that they would make.
So the hardest or easiest part, what part would you say for that?
So I think the hardest part was reminding them how to use a ruler, make sure we're measuring in correct units, and then the protractors. They haven't used those in a while, so just kind of reminding them how to measure the angles out.
And then what about the easiest part?
So the easiest part was probably just how well they worked together. I didn't really have to do anything for that. They were great.
So then what leads then is what does this mean for your future planning as far as based on your answers that you had?
So for future planning, I think I'm going to spend a little more time talking about how to use protractors, make sure before we go in, so we don't have to waste time at the beginning of class where they could instead just keep making their triangles and making those connections.
Sure. So that leads then to our next area as far as what would you do differently? What would you do differently as far as how your students were engaged or not engaged?
So for this class, like I said, they were pretty well engaged, but maybe for some other classes, they were a little more chatty. And so I think giving them maybe a specific question that they had to answer the following day so that they really worked with just their group and were focusing on the one question that they were responsible for answering the following day.
Sure, that would be a good way to get them on task. So then how would you determine the groups knowing that you know you're going to do that next time?
So what I did this time is when they walked in, I had cards and then they just picked one and that was their group. I think I'd still do the same thing next time because then, they don't sit with their friends, so that kind of helps make sure they're more on task, and that way I'm not picking on them.
Sure.
The ones that want to sit by their friends.
Sure. So then that would lead me to the next question is, how do you feel as the students were doing their labs, how did you feel when you were observing them with their rulers and protractors?
They were doing really well. I saw a lot of kids helping each other, so then to make sure everyone was measuring their angles correctly, measuring their triangles correctly. One student found that one of the sides was the same length as the hypotenuse, and so I heard his group members telling him maybe we should remeasure that because they shouldn't be the same.
Mm-hmm. So then what are some ways you would handle the certain student behaviors as far as the ones that were not participating?
Okay, yep. So I think, again, having them have a question that they needed next time and just kind of making sure that they know ahead of time what's expected, and so then they're kind of focusing on the expectations so that the following day they're more prepared to kind of answer all the questions.
Sure. So then you pretty much answered my next question. What are you going to do next time? And that's going to be have questions prepared for your groups. That way they know what their question's going to be before they share out.
Yep.
Great. So then my last thing before we sum it up would be how does this incorporate your lesson with the West Des Moines District Plan?
So differentiation is one of our things, and so just the hands-on activity, having them measure out things, helps with the differentiation because I know a lot of those students are more kind of hands-on learners.
Sure. And then how do you feel our lesson went as far as with the Iowa standards, with the planning, and then also with the classroom management?
Yep, so with the planning, like 3D, select strategies to engage all students of learning. I think the hands-on, like I said, they were all really engaged. They could all participate and So just kind of encourage them to participate more since they were doing it on their own.
Sure.
And then 6B, establishes, communicates, models, and maintains standards. So I just kind of communicated with the students everything that was expected of them, kind of told them what the expectations were, and made sure that they were clear on all the directions.
Sure. And so then that leads me into, as we look at our artifact here with gathering evidence, again, can you sum up what was your growth area and what area is areas of course that you have mastered and your strength area, and then what would be our next steps?
Okay, so I'll start with the part that I mastered. So I think planning. I like to think that I'm pretty well organized. The students came in, the desks were already put together in groups. They had the protractors there, the rulers were there, the directions were there, so it was kind of all ready for them. And then for kind of growth and the next steps that I'm going to take, again, finding questions for the students so that they're, again, more engaged and kind of leading us to what we're doing in the discussion the next day.
Sure. And so then that leads us to our next step together would be, what would be our teacher responsibilities, you as a teacher and me as an evaluator, in developing your individual teacher professional development plan?
Okay, so I think just getting the feedback from when you were observing, I think that really helps. So then it just kind of gives me another view on what I have. So looking at the students, if they weren't engaged, letting me know which ones were or weren't engaged in case I didn't see it, and then just kind of making sure that, again, I get those questions so that all those students are engaged and they're all participating.
Well, thank you, Megan. I really enjoyed my observation with you. Being a fellow math teacher with you, it was a great experience, and I felt like I learned a lot also, and we'll keep learning from each other, being lifelong learners.
Yep.
And so I appreciate you doing this post-observation conference with me, and I look forward to us developing your individual teacher development plan based on your growth area, your strength area, of course, and then our next steps.
All right.
So, cheers to mathematics.
Cheers to mathematics.
Cheers to mathematics.